for the new age of like the fintech, so we have to at the same time know your data. That's the new trend. Because right now, for example, like the cons transaction, the Bitcoins transaction, we don't know exactly what person who is behind the transaction. Rather, we would know which data is doing that kind of transaction. So for the new trend of compliance, we need to have some new concept. For example, like know your client, know your data, know your transaction. That something is the new concept.
Compliance is the career up for discussion on today's podcast. Our guest today has viewed compliance as a life's work, undertaking senior roles in the field at major companies and angel investment firms, including Shanghai Pudong Development Bank, Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, and China Renaissance. A lawyer by profession, she is currently the Chief Executive Officer at RegFlags and Innotech Strategies in Hong Kong. She's also the Chief Compliance Officer at the United Nations Development Programme. In today's episode, our guest talks about her journey with drafting the 2003 Hong Kong security law and much more. It is my pleasure to welcome Jenny Chow on today's podcast and discuss with her. You are listening to The Career Show, a podcast that helps you find the right career and inspires you to follow your passion. My name is Trishant Kansrajani, and I'm a student seeking answers to career-based questions that we all have. I'm here to sit down with career specialists and talk to them about the lessons learned during the journey of their career. Hi Jenny, thank you so much for taking your time out and being here. Such an honor to have you on to the Career Show.
Thank you for your invitation. Yeah.
Since my introduction tells us that we're going to be talking about compliance today, I know compliance is such an important part of every industry. Every industry that people work in has some sort of compliance in it. What is the importance of compliance according to you?
As you said, it is very important and also important in every industry, because you know that every industry has its own rules and risks to observe. It is very important in every industry. For example, like recently we are doing some biotech. Previously, we would think that for biotech, it's only like financial institution needs to have compliance. But right now, for the biotech, they have to like consult us to like, because they have to observe all sorts of privacy rules. It is the same as financial institutions right now. As I've told you that because I've been working with investment banks for very long years, so I understand that compliance is often seems to be in conflict with innovation. But for me, apart from like we have to observe the set rules, the rules and regulation. For me, innovation is all apart from more than creating brand new things. In order to innovate, you have to build something new on the foundation of something which already set up. For example, like the framework, the regulations, and all kinds of things that have been set up. So for this reason, to innovate or design something for the maximum positive impact, one has to understand, apart from that, they have to understand their circumstances, the framework they are operating within. So therefore, compliance is also important right now for the innovation as well, because we have seen there's so many new, like the innovative ideas, all the things. If they have to be successful, at the same time, they need to know about what they need to comply with. Where are they in right now? So for this reason, compliance is really important in all senses.
Super cool. Super cool. So let's go back into history now and let's talk about the 2003 Hong Kong draft law. I know you were part of drafting that law. So can you take us through that journey?
Oh, that's great. In fact, it is my honor to be in the drafting team at that point of time. I was responsible for drafting that new law at that point of time, because for that new regulation, in fact, it's very at that time is in fact very revolutionary, in fact, because you know that at that point of time when I was in the drafting team is in the 90s. So at that point of time, Hong Kong has already evolved into an international financial center. But you know that at that time, the law itself was in fact date back to the 70s. It's the 70s law, the legacy of the 70s. But you know that for in the 80s, due to the different stock market crisis, in Hong Kong we have a very famous report. It's called Hay-Davidson report. That is a report made by an English guy who raised that new idea of self-regulation. That formed the foundation right now for the securities law, the self-regulation, the concept of self-regulation. And based on that report, and so we draft this new securities law at that time. So for that law, we have to, based on this self-regulation concept, we have to draft something new into the securities law. For example, to increase the power of the regulators. Because before that, the regulators didn't have any power at all. As compared to like the police and other law enforcement bodies. But in fact, if you wish to have a stabilized financial market, you have to like increase the power of the regulator so as to make the market in a more regulated way. That would be better. So for that reason, we have to build in the powers, and also at the same time, we have to review the human rights law implication on the new securities law. But more importantly, at that point of time, we have seen some new technology. So we have to put in like the electronic transaction concept into the 2003 ordinance. But remember, at that point of time, we still have email for like a few years in the office. So at that point of time, we put in that new revolutionary ideas of electronic transactions, how we can collect the evidence, what are the bases. That's also very revolutionary at that point of time. And this is a really wonderful experience for me. For like right now we are doing red tag, and so we have to adopt a lot of technology. But because I have that experience, I understand the basis of the technology, how we can like apply technologies into the compliance areas, because that's important. So I think that's a wonderful experience. Yeah.
You mentioned that one of the reasons that you were part of this law was because regulators wanted to increase their power. Has that theme been consistent over the years? And by this, I want to ask you is like, what is the new age of compliance today? Do regulators still change laws to increase their power in the market?
You see that starting from the year of 2000, you see that there are more and more penalties on the financial institutions. And you also see that, for example, like the Lehman Brothers case. So in fact, the regulators need to play a role to protect the investor interests. So that's important. But you asked the right question. So what is the new age of compliance? Because a few years ago, we're still at the old times. So at that point of time, doing compliance to some extent is only like the check the boxes exercise only. So you get the checklist and see what you have done and to make sure you have done all the things, and then that will mean that you are compliant. But in the new age of compliance, because we have more challenges, for example, like the fintech, you will know that right now, the fintech, we have different types of new technology assist financial activities. So at the same time, if they are using that kind of new technology, the regulatory part, they need to have to adopt the same level of technology to tackle all this compliance issue, or to track or to monitor that kind of transaction. So this is the new age of the compliance, because at least for the first point, we need to adopt the same level of technology. That's for the first point for that new age. The second point will be, there will be new concept. For example, like for right now, we have the concept of know your client. Because transaction, know your clients mean you have to know your client before you do any transaction with them to understand their, for example, like their risk profile, so that you can sell some products suitable for them. That is the right now the current regulatory concept for like a protection of the investor. But for the new age of like the fintech, so we have to at the same time know your data. That's the new trend. Because right now, for example, like the coins transaction, the Bitcoins transaction, we don't know exactly what person who is behind the transaction. Rather, we would know which data is doing that kind of transaction. So for the new trend of compliance, we need to have some new concept. For example, like know your client, know your data, know your transaction. That something is the new concept.
So after the 2003 law that came in, has the law changed again? And the reason I ask this is because how often do these compliance laws change? And how does a professional keep up with these laws?
Basically, the 2003 legislation remained largely the same
Okay.
For 20 years. But for like the different rules or maybe some small amendments, they are quite often. For like globally, I'll give you a figure. Globally, there are more than 70 rules come into existence every day.
Wow.
So there are a lot of them. So for this statistic, it's already like a last year statistic. So maybe this year will be more. Yeah. So previously, professionals had to update their understanding of rules frequently by reading the regulator circulars or notes every day. They have to check it so as to make sure they comply with all these rules. But you know that right now we can't do it isn't sufficient to you to read all the circulars of the regulators. Even the regulators now quite lag behind from the new development of the fintech or the cryptocurrency and all kinds of new financial activities. So right now we need to rely on the RegTech to use the new technology to keep track of all the new regulatory changes and new concepts, so as to keep up all these changes. So so right now RegTech becomes more and more important for that reason as well.
By talking about red tech, let's move to your journey now. And let's
Yeah.
start from the very beginning. You worked at investment banks, top leading Chinese investment banks, to currently working with UNDP and a fintech
Yes.
firm called Red Tech.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about how compliance is different at all these three industries? Because I'm sure investment banking is different from the United Nations Development Program, and UNDP is different from fintech. So, how has your role changed over these three industries?
So for the investment bank, so I have been the chief compliance officer of ICBCI. I think it's one of the biggest bank in the world. So for working in that kind of giant financial institution, compliance is like more like just now I mentioned about to check the boxes, because we have all kinds of different checklists of different operation to make sure every department is working in compliance with all the rules. Have to tell you that because ICBCI is a very big Chinese bank. For the mainland Chinese system, they have to do that check the boxes exercise a lot, because for the legal system in mainland China, it is very clear for you to follow every steps. And you have to make sure you follow every step before you can say that you are in compliance. So for that reason, the exercise will be more like doing all the check all the boxes every day, and to make sure my staff is conscious about whether they have completed the exercise every day. And later on, you know that I later on moved to the UNDP to be their chief compliance officers for the innovative finance. That's different. That's different things. They wish to set up the benchmark for the new way of innovative finance model. So we have to set up all the compliance standards and the risk management standards for this new impact investment mainly. So we have to adopt, because previously when working in the investment bank, so you know that that's talking about money. Most of the time it's talking about money. So we can rely on all kinds of different models, financial models, or different financial statement that's talking about a lot of figures to rely on. To some extent, it is easier because that's already established. All kinds of models, benchmark already established, quite good. So that's why the check the boxes approach is adopted, because that's easier for us to check all the figures are tied to different requirements. But for the UNDP, because innovative finance impact investment is talking about how much good you do to the society or do to the environment, that's talking about no figures at all. So we have to assess the impact by different parameters. We have to determine which parameters we use to make that assessment. So that's the part I have to kind of like invent or to explore different ways to build that benchmark things. That's really interesting. That's for the UNDP part. And right now I start my own startup, RegTech company called RegFlags. So it is another thing. The reason why I do this is because I think everyone observed that, because right now we have entered into like the fintech 3.0 already. So there are different types of new financial activities in the market. You know that I have witnessed a lot of crises in the stock markets over the 25 years. So every time there will be some problems. The reason would be, for that part, they haven't been regulated. So later on, there will become some problem. So that will be the same in the fintech market. So right now, for the fintech market, they are not sufficiently regulated. So if we don't introduce some regulatory or self-regulatory concept to them, that would be a problem. Later on, they will easily have some other crisis. So that's the reason why I start up this RegTech company, to use the same level of technology to give them some assessment, whether they are healthy, whether they are in compliance with some, not necessarily the law, but some the concept of protection of investors. So this is the idea of setting up this RegTech.
Wow, that is a broad range of experience that you have. And this is a question that I usually ask a lot of people, because when people have such a broad range of experiences, there are a lot of challenges that you face during this long experience of yours. So what has been one of the biggest challenges of being a compliance officer during this long journey of yours?
I think of course, there are a lot of challenges. So maybe mention some of the challenges first before I go to the most challenging part. I think some challenges will be you have to be knowledgeable in several ways, or in several fields. For example, I myself is a lawyer.
Wow.
So So I myself, yes, I got my LLB degree and also get my lawyer certification in the SFC of Hong Kong, Securities and Futures Commission of Hong Kong. So I'm a lawyer, but at the same time, because my first task assigned to me by the SFC, because I joined my first job was with SFC. So the first assignment they assigned to me, in fact, was internal audit work. I have to audit some financial institutions before I can continue my trainee solicitorship with them. So you have to. I'm also understand how to do audit, and at the same time, I have to be familiar with different other things. Like I have to know about fund. So I have to work with the fund managers and have to work with the brokers to understand the securities transactions. So you have to be able to familiarize with all these different knowledge in different fields. That's important. The second challenges will be you have to be very updated. So you have to at all time to understand the latest trend in your industry. So that's also one of the reasons why recently I start to learn more about the technology and start a red tech company, because technology right now becomes a very crucial part of the financial transaction. I think, but these two challenges is only about the knowledge part. It's not that difficult. I think the most challenging part for a compliance officer is you understand where you are standing. You're understanding which principles to apply and what kind of interest you are protecting. Because sometimes for the salesperson, they are doing I'm not saying wrongly, but doing not properly. So you have to understand what interest you are protecting. So if you are for compliance, usually we are looking after the interests of our clients. That means the investors. So in that regard, you have to understand, oh, in fact, you are protecting the clients. But you know that you are paid by your boss, who may be the salesperson of the company. So you have to stand firm and to explain to them nicely the consequence if they don't do it well. So I think this is the most challenging part, because you know that when you talk to someone that, oh, you're not doing something well, so please correct the way, or please adopt the other way. Usually they will think that their feedback is not. So you have to persuade them, because you are paid by you have to serve them well, but at the same time you let them know how the consequence.
Like I mentioned earlier, that journey is super inspirational, and thank you for sharing that advice with all the listeners. But you've been talking a lot about technology and compliance together, and that is the
Mhm.
perfect cue in for a Got Career questions in partnership with Suzuki, which is the resume of the new generation, wherein a couple of students from Suzuki have sent in questions for you. And the first one
Mhm.
actually is, how does technology play a role in compliance in today's world?
Mhm. Mm, yeah, in fact, the technology helps compliance officer achieve three things: better judgment, prudence, and an integrated way approach to achieving compliance. So for that, I elaborate more. For you making a better judgment, because for technology, right now we got a lot of data. Even though in my times or a few years ago, we have to every day we have to deal with a lot of transaction data to analyze it, to make sure the firm is in compliance. But right now we have technology that's easier, because in currently or in the year, already we are using some kind of technology to automate the process to analyze the data for us. But that's not sufficient. The latest technology, because it is better and faster. So the technology right now can serve to facilitate the generation of more objective data, to support the analysis of data, to help compliance officers to generate insights from the findings. That's for the first technology can help us. And also, that for compliance, it's also the concept of prudence. Just now I mentioned that because when I was working with the investment bank, we used the check the box exercise, but it doesn't really tell you whether the firm is in compliance or not. You just know that, oh, I have ticked the boxes, I have discharged all my duties. So, but because when we use technology to remove all these tedious process, people's time can be put more into generating insight. I think that's good in that purpose to we can become more prudent, can have a better overview about the firms or that industry's general compliance, whether it is compliant with certain regulations or certain benchmark. And also technology can help integration. But that's important to have a senior compliance officer because they have that integration idea to integrate all the concepts together and to take care of all the rules and regulations. And you have to be very experienced and understanding all aspects of regulations to make decisions. But if technology can combine with that senior compliance officers, so to take out all the tedious work from the senior compliance officer, and the compliance officer at the same time can teach the technology, that for the AI, machine learning thing, the compliance officers can also work out how to generate that insight. So when the technology learns it, and also help to formulate a better insight for the industry. I think that's the way technology can help.
So all the listeners, technology is super important for compliance. Yes. And the next question that came in was in regards to how does a student become a good compliance officer, especially when they are starting off their journey right of college? What are 2 or 3 things they can do to become a good compliance officer?
I think they have to, first of all, to know more about, to join the industry, to really study hard about the relevant rules and regulation. That's the first thing they have to do. The second will be they have to understand more about the different compliance programs, how they can do that. I think if it is possible, they can walk through all the steps with their seniors to understand more from their seniors how they can make that decision. I think for them, that's a very good experience because at my time, we take some pupillage. Yeah, mm-hmm. So we just observe how our senior officers were doing so that we learn from them. So that's the way, just now I mentioned about how the senior officers teach the technology. Also similar to that, because for the technology, they try to simulate the human behavior so that they can learn a lot from the human behavior to do the work. And it is the same. But maybe for the junior student, they have to know that what they simulate should be the way the senior officers to generate their insight and how they make their judgment. I think that's important for them to differentiate themselves from the technology. Because I think for the technology one, they are doing the tedious, redundant work. But for the juniors, they have to know that how to make the judgment, how to do the integration is what they should simulate from their senior.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was the God Careers question. Thank you so much for answering those questions, Jenny. And now I want to ask you my traditional last question and my favorite question of the podcast. And that is, what is one advice you wished you had received when you were starting off your journey as a compliance officer so many years back?
Yeah. I have to tell you that because that before I answer you, I have to tell you that because when I first joined compliance 25 years ago, in fact, at that point of time, compliance hasn't been mature yet. So it's only like people would know what is internal audit, but didn't know about anything compliance. What is compliance? In fact, they have no idea at all. So in fact, it seems like I'm growing with compliance. So I also contribute quite a lot in this growth of compliance professional. So because you know that I draft the law and I'm also a trainer in compliance. So for that, so it seems to me that when I was young, I didn't think that I can have any that kind of advice because of that, because I grow with them. But for to answer your question, because at this point of time, if I would think about this question, I would think that the most important thing for a compliance officer is that you understand where you are standing. You understand what kind of principles you are protecting. Yeah, so I think this is the advice everyone should understand before they in this compliance field, because at all times the compliance officer, the most difficult thing is they have to make a judgment what is compliant and what isn't. So first of all is that you need to know where you're standing.
Well, thank you so much, Jenny. We got to learn a lot. And all the future compliance officers, make sure to make the right judgment and do your research and understand what compliance is for your clients.
Yeah.
And once again, thank you so much, Jenny. It's been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for sharing the journey. Thank you for sharing the journey of your job.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this week's career discussion. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means a lot.